Hello everyone, Khai here from LongHash Ventures, and welcome to a special episode of the Web3 Native Podcast. Now you may know that we hosted an incredible event called the Web3 Transitions Summit, where we brought together the top minds to share about the latest in infrastructure that can enable mass adoption of Web3. This event was of course inspired by the writing of Vitalik on the three transitions. So of course we had Vitalik himself deliver the closing keynote focused on account abstraction. While he was here, we also had the special chance to catch him backstage to share a more candid message to builders who are still in this bear market. We kicked off with an inspirational message around what keeps you going, what keeps you motivated in this bear market. We zoomed out across the application landscape to think about the evolution and what is the latest in this landscape. We talk about the decision making of how do you approach revenue evo curve, becoming a public good, convex and concave decision making, or even building your own social graph and reputation. We then move to a softer side of things around what should builders coordinate around, Ethereum builder culture and values, and of course, a lighthearted take reflecting on 2023. This is an incredible episode, so I hope you enjoy. What kept you going through these times?
I think it's just important to keep looking at the just progress that's being made in the space, and seeing how our understanding of how to build different things keeps advancing, our understanding of technology keeps advancing, our understanding of what it actually takes to make things that are usable by regular people continues to improve. We continue to learn what kind of governance works and what kind of governance doesn't work, and just I think it's really valuable to continue seeing the ongoing progress that happens there, right? And to remember that I think Twitter does have this narrative cycle that kind of flips from good to bad roughly every 4 to 6 months, and it feels like it has to do that way pretty much regardless of what the fundamentals are, right? And sometimes the way that you detect and notice this is you look at the substance and you check, well, what is the thing that people are actually complaining about, right? 4 years ago, the complaint was that proof of stake will never happen. 2 years ago, the complaint was that proof of stake will get delayed. 1.5 years ago, the complaint was that proof of stake is bad. And, proof of stake is, here. And, it's been running for, at this point, actually, as of, I think, tomorrow, exactly a year. So, a lot of, underlying progress keeps getting made, right? Or, if you look at roll-ups, 4 years ago, the criticism is that they would never happen. Then, 2 years ago, the criticism is that, well, they're all multi-sigs. And then, now the criticism is, well, oh, they'll actually just take a long time to stop being multi-sigs, right? So, you always keep track in the back of your head, what the underlying words behind the sentiment actually are. And, you realize that, well, even if the vibes have to always keep going from minus to plus because that's just how Twitter works, their underlying content, I think, really does keep changing in a way that, from the point of view of just the ecosystem and the things that we're building, it really does continue to be in the space's favor.
Right. The memory of the real progress that we've made, both individually and collectively, reminds us of the strength.
Yes.
All right. Well, with that, let's go into these questions that we've prepared based on your writing, of course. One from last year, December of last year. Vitalik, you wrote about the applications that you're most excited about: money, simple DeFi, identity, and more specifically, getting identity, people with on-chain identity, not platforms, and also DAOs, and in what cases it makes sense to decentralize. It's been, almost a year now, and reflecting on these, do you still stand by these areas, or are they new ones, or you want to tweak some of them?
I feel like the areas are still about the same as they have been before. I think we have definitely seen a lot of progress in seeing a lot of these become more mature. So I think the identity space in particular has seen a huge amount of progress. And what I mean by that is, one, ZK identity has made massive leaps, right? And things like Sysmo and Hanon are just being regularly used. Then we have Zupass, another pretty powerful zero knowledge identity platform, and that's something that the team is just continuing to work on and really start to run with. We are seeing more and more options for proof of personhood. Also, in terms of applications that use this stuff, I mean, Forecaster has taken off like massively, and it's continued to improve. Like it actually now has Ethereum address-based account recovery, and so the whole like actually using your Ethereum address as your identity root concept is like actually moving forward. We have again, Lens obviously continuing to move forward, and Lens has been based on Ethereum accounts since day one. Continuing to have a growing ecosystem of like different kinds of attestations and stamps and like things that you can use. And I mean, there's still the potential to like integrate them in things like Forecaster, like that hasn't properly been, I think, done yet to enough of the right extent, but like it's getting there. So just all of the different layers of the stack in identity and reputation and like actually using those things are, I think, improving a lot. I think with DeFi, it feels kind of similar to how it has always been before, right? And just the real importance of keeping DeFi simple, and instead of trying really hard to give people 6% APR instead of 4%, we need to try really hard to reduce the chance that people's APR is minus 100%. And that's something that is, I think, there are enough projects that value it that are continuing to improve. I mean, I think there's definitely some parts of DeFi that just fall into the trap of overcomplicating themselves, but there's also other parts that don't. The layer 2 space does continue getting better, and like we've actually seeing rollups getting to stage 1, like Arbitrum has, and like more progress, and progress on interoperability and progress on all kinds of other things. And so that's good. On the DAOs, I don't know. I feel like DAOs have been one that's kind of a bit stagnant. I just want to see like more work on better forms of governance. Like people kind of feel like coin voting is okay and like keep it, which is like an attitude that I really dislike. So I continue to want to see more alternatives to that. And I'm grateful for like Optimism and like anyone else that does try a different model. Then the other one is like ZK blockchain, hybrid applications, and especially those kinds of things in an enterprise context. And I think the key thing to keep in mind there is like the first version of this is basically crypto exchanges doing proof of solvency, right? Like crypto exchanges are enterprises, and ZK proof of solvency is literally basically a sort of layer 3 enterprise blockchain, right? It's especially if you're publishing the Merkle roots on chain, you're giving people proofs of their database branches, like that already gives people an assurance that their coins are in a system that's updating and tracking people's balances correctly. And so that I think is good. And I think there's like a huge amount of applications, like basically everything that tried to do permission consortium chains back in 2015 to 19, like can move on to Validiums now. So supply chain management, games, like various financial applications tied to supply chain management, the list goes on and on, right? Like I think there's a lot of stuff that you could do for Validiums, and they're like, I mean, Paul Brody has been writing a book about like enterprise blockchain, and like EY I think has basically been taking this direction the whole time, which I think is great. But then we've also been seeing the just growth in the underlying technology itself. Like even 1 to 2 years ago, you really needed to understand cryptography yourself to build your own ZK app, and like now that's basically no longer true, right? Which is amazing. So yeah, a lot of I think progress on all 5 of these. I mean, do I think any of the fundamentals in what we need to prioritize on the application side change? I would say not really. I would say it's still continuation of the same stuff as before. On the technical side, I think there are some prioritizations that have changed, like really working hard to make sure that staking remains decentralized. Priority of that has gone up. Working hard to make sure that rollups actually have a scaling option, and have that quickly. The priority of that has gone up, and it's gone up even more now that there's Accelo that's looking to become a layer 2, and potentially a lot of other projects looking to do the same thing. So I feel like on the tech, like the thinking and the priorities has probably changed more over the last year than it has on the application side.
Okay. Yeah, which we will have plenty of time to discuss. Now, for these applications specifically, moving on to what model they should adopt, right? Like there's a lot of emphasis on Ethereum on public goods. And so does that mean that these protocols, well, imagine a new DeFi app or a new DAO, right? So should they strive to be public goods in thinking about the revenue evil curve, right? So it's kind of like, should they strive to be such that their curve is like the steepest? So then it's like, it almost make themselves infeasible to monetize. So such that like, it will forever be a public good and like funded through grants or, what's your view on this?
I don't think that was the like the interpretation that I wanted to go for, right? Because like I don't want things to be impossible to monetize. Like I want to create more ways for like good things in general to monetize, right? So like having more kinds of public goods funding mechanisms, whether that's quadratic funding or retro funding or something else.
Right. It's more like maybe the balance was very skewed towards
right, like,
and therefore this.
Exactly. Yeah, I think like the problem is that like these alternative sources of revenue have not really existed, and so the need for revenue has just caused a lot of projects to really like abandon their values in a lot of ways, and that's something that I think we need to really work hard to like stop and reverse even more.
I see. What about in terms of decision making? Right? Because we also talk about concave and convex decision making, and of course at the infra level or at certain key primitive protocol levels, the concave style where like you have the collective wisdom could be more resilient.
Right.
But often at the application level, there is a convex type of decision making where you really all in on particular niches and design decisions. How should they think about this trade off and how do they interact with the underlying philosophy of being concave?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to just identify which kind of curve you're facing, right? Like one of the points that I made is that I think public goods funding is more concave than many other things, right? Like if you're choosing strategies for an application, often going half and half on two strategies is worse than choosing one. But if you're choosing funding, like generally, splitting funding up in half is like better than going all in on one, right? And like there are exceptions, like if you have $1 billion and you want to land on Mars, then giving it to one person is a bit like a better deal than like giving $1 each to 1 billion people. But a lot of the time, I think the ecosystem is a very wide one, and there's a huge amount of room to support multiple teams trying different things and having multiple approaches. So that's like one example of like a place where you're pretty concave, but then there are other contexts where you're pretty convex, and like big strategy pivots definitely. Another example of something that's concave is like most DAO parameter setting. Like if like for even just like take the Ethereum gas limit, right? If you had to choose between a coin flip of X and Y or the average of X and Y, the average of X and Y is generally better, pretty much regardless what X and Y are, right? Like, coin flip between 1 million and a billion versus, a geometric average of the two is 32 million, right? Well, 32 million just happens to be like basically the gas limit Ethereum has today, and it's like pretty sane. But then a coin flip, well, if it's 1 million, then using the chain is pretty much impractically expensive, and like if it's 1 billion, then it's impractical to like actually run a node and verify it, right? So another example of that would be if you're doing a multi-collateralized stablecoin, then if you get like one set of choices for what the collateral is, and if you get another team create another set of choices for what the allowed collateral is, like if you just take those two choices, it's almost always, I think, better to 50-50 average those than to like coin flip one, right? So that's also another good example. Like there's a lot of specific situations, and especially when kind of the approximate structure of a project is already set and you're just doing parameter tweaking, that like you are in the concave world, and like being as decentralized as possible is just good for resilience. But then there's other places where like either you're in the middle of executing an unexpected pivot, or you are just setting things up and trying to get the ball rolling for the first time. And in those cases, like you're more likely to be in convex land, and then being able to have like a person propose a strategy and like themselves as someone willing to execute on it and giving them a lot of authority is like something that's more valuable.
Right. Yeah. So it's about also thinking about which parts or which stage and kind of exposing the concave parts, and for those parts making sure that we have that plural and diverse.
Exactly.
And of course that requires an actual plural and diverse I guess like stakeholder or like governance base. And that's where we come to the idea of course soulbound tokens and building our own social graphs. Should every project strive to build some sort of reputation system in social graph? Of course, I don't mean build their own system, but it adopts, SVTs, NFTs, and so on. Yeah.
It depends on which project. I mean, I think there are things that every project should be doing. Like I think creating on-chain records of like who the key contributors were. Like even if you don't have any money, like just leave that information out there so that it could get used for retro funding later. And then like the ideal goal is to have like as wide and as accurate a graph of like all of the different cross citations as possible. And that's like one thing that anyone can do that then like basically becomes a reputation system in a certain sense. Just like finding ways to like attest to like which people just actively participated in a community, right? Like proof of participation, attestations, SBT tokens of some kind is valuable. But then once you start getting deeper, like in terms of how these things get used, it depends on the use case, right? Like I think something like Uniswap basically has no need for them. But on the other hand, like social media does, right? And that's just because Uniswap is just like inherently finance, and but then social media is like inherently a micro governance, right? It's like a micro voting system for each post. So there's a bit of a difference there. Yeah.
Do you have a view on how was it? I think more ideal way or differences in ways to curate reputation for between the more human side of things like attestations, let's say between lens on like who I think is reputable or legitimate, versus the more kind of automated like proof of reputation way of let's say you've voted on how many governance votes, which could be gamed, right? As the more you set the parameters, the humans can kind of like civil check or like tamper proof check that.
Yeah, I think like that sort of fully automated stuff, like I honestly think you should not even try to do. I think relying on human inputs is just good. And then the question is like, what level of sophistication would go into formulas that rely on these inputs, right? And like if you make more complicated formulas, then it's like less credibly neutral in the sense that like it gives you more wiggle room to basically push for the outcomes that you want it to have anyway. And it also increases the risk that your system is like somehow fragile against like very unexpected inputs in some unexpected way. So avoiding that is important. I think I mean, what we saw with community notes recently is a good example, right? Like I've written that post about it, and I think it's actually a pretty successful example of credibly neutral like micro governance that we can all learn a lot from, right? And the algorithm is it's definitely much more complex than I would like, but it's definitely very simple when you benchmark it against like the average, like social media ranking algorithm, which is just an insane monstrosity of millions of clauses, right? And so that I think is like an example of something to emulate and something to build on top of. And in that case, you have automation and you also have inputs, right? And the algorithm is like simple and clear enough that like it's not going it's not going to be as vulnerable to attack as like something much more complicated where like if you have something keyword based, right, for example, right, then like once it's open sourced, like the attacker knows exactly which keywords to avoid and they can like simulate locally and you get away with whatever, right? So I think that's a good reason why like in general I'm a fan of relying on human input a lot, but also aggregating that input in a clever and thoughtful way.
Right. as a human manually, but then scale that or some sort of algorithm or sort
Right.
of
Yeah, exactly.
optimization. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's the prepared ones. I had a more open-ended one, which is, is there anything else that builders should hear that we should socially coordinate it around so that we can create a more purposeful, resilient, and impactful next wave of adoption?
I mean, I think just working together on standards as an ecosystem as we transition to account abstraction and layer twos. Same thing for privacy. Same thing for attestations, especially now that we're starting to move into the ZK world. Like as a DApp, be like ERC, like 1271 compliant, and then like be compliant with like I forget the exact number, but the ERC that basically extends 1271 to contracts whose code has not yet been published on chain. There's a lot of just like simple things like that. I mean, like when you build a DApp, make sure that it's not accidentally MetaMask only, which a lot of people accidentally do. That's just like basic things that like keep the ecosystem and like all layers of the stack and like open place where new people can come in and participate.
All right, always keeping that friendly ecosystem. Yeah. I'd love to start closing off now, and we've talked about a lot of the factual things, and now back to the more human element again. One reason that people keep staying in the space also is not just that, hey, all these cool things happening, but also we feel a sense of like, hey, I belong here. I resonate with a certain culture and certain vibe in Ethereum, right? And there are many ways to describe it, of course, the subtraction ethos, the decentralization ethos, the freedom and sovereignty, and around concaveness. Would you like to share any kind of latest thoughts about Ethereum culture? Has it any new words that you used to describe, or has it shifted, or would you like it to move in a certain direction if you could shape it?
Good question. It's always hard to define, right? And it's like, I mean, hard for me to define too. Just I think there's a lot of the values that you've mentioned, right? And the other question is like, are we viewing this from the point of view of like Ethereum versus things that are not in the crypto world, or Ethereum versus like Bitcoin, or Ethereum versus like some of the newer layer ones, right? It's like I feel like if the Ethereum kind of culture ends up implicitly having like different kinds of values that come out of all of those, right? So I mean, openness, like freedom, just being an accessible and global community, being pragmatism, value. Like actually, like valuing decentralization and taking it seriously. The spirit of supporting public goods and like trying to be positive sum, right? I think one of Balaji's phrases sticks with me. It's trying to not just do live and let live, but also do win and help win. And that's, I think, something that has like implicitly become part of like the regen community and part of Ethereum's spirit in general as well. So I think all of those different things are valuable, and I think like new things get added on all the time, and that's like a great thing.
For sure, and we welcome anyone who also resonates with these. Let's wrap up with one quick word you would use to describe 2023 or 2024.
How would I describe 2023 and 2024? That's a good one. Like, I mean, if you asked about 2022, it would obviously, in retrospect, it just felt like a sort of fiery winter of hell in like so many ways. But 2023 just, it feels like this, this year of calm where it's much less loud and blaring, but important things are still happening. I don't know of one good English word to describe that spirit.
Russian word then.
Oh dear.
Or Chinese word actually.
No. I know. I'm trying to. Yeah, that's a hard one. I'm going through all the languages. I'm like even looking through the Japanese era names. But like no. It's I don't know. It is too hard for one word. But like slow. Yeah. quiet and deliberate progress.
Mm.
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 The
Tranquility,
yes.
steadiness.
Well, not quite steadiness. It's not a point. It's a vector,
Mm.
but it's still tranquil, right?
Mm.
Yeah. So it's like tranquility, but it's also like a tranquilizer dart that's in flight, and eventually it's gonna hit, and then things are gonna happen.
Well, it's an irony that when the dart hits, it's supposed to be well, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
maybe
It will make the centralized world quieter.
Yes, immobilize
Yes.
the powers of the centralizer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a good one.
Perfect.
Tranquilizer.
Okay.
We'll stick with that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Vitalik.
Thank you too.
Do you do handshakes or fist bumps?
Fist bump. Okay.